Welcome to SpanReads, not your typical rereads podcast, a 17-shard series where we reread the Cosmere and are giant nerds about it. Today, we will be talking about Mistborn, the Final Empire in the context of the whole Cosmere. Joining me is Mish.
Hi, firstRainbowRose.
Also joining me is Ian.
Hey, I'm your editor.
And Rosemary.
I'm Kaymyth.
Next up is Matt.
I'm Comatose on the forums.
And lastly is Kadie.
I'm AonEne.
And I'm Jessie, or Lady Lameness. This episode is going to have full Cosmere spoilers up to and including Rhythm of War, which is the most recent book that has been released. So if there's anything that happens in the Lost Metal that might be relevant, we don't have it. We wish we did, but we don't have it yet.
We were having a conversation earlier in these episodes, and I thought of something. Because in Rhythm of War, we learned Thydakar is Kelsier. On our interview with Brandon, he spoke a little about the Ghost Bloods and about how Kelsier is very good at having a very healthy crew dynamic when he's around. And it's when, like, he's not around that issues start happening and you get Roshar and Ghost Bloods, which are not good people. But it's interesting that the point of the crew that failed Eden, it happened when Kelsier wasn't around.
Mm-hmm.
Kelsier, he built him up, and Eden thought he knew what he was doing, but he didn't have Kelsier to hold him back from going a step too far. And I just thought, oh, like, this makes sense now.
There are also moments in the book where the crew is ready to throw in the towel until Kelsier shows up and says, no, look, this isn't as bad as you think it is. So he's not just keeping them from doing dumb stuff, but he's also keeping them on track, keeping them focused on the goal.
And I think it goes both ways as well, because I think those moments show Kelsier that he also needs to rein it in. Otherwise, people are going to start disappearing. And it is a two-way street.
The spoilers that spoilery thing that I picked up on was I love the reflection. And when Vin finds her mist cloak, it's because there's a tassel hanging out. And in Alloy of Law, when Wax finds his mist cloak at the very end, it's because there's a tassel hanging out of a chest and they notice it. And I loved catching that reflection.
And
I also noticed
keep in mind, Stazed was there when Vin found hers, and he is at least somewhat responsible for setting that up.
Oh yeah,
for Wax. And it's almost like he mirrored it on purpose.
I wouldn't be surprised if Brandon mirrored it on purpose, but I love that little mirror of, okay, I caught that. And
what I was going to say during one of the episodes that I thought realized was a spoiler, I talked in the character episode, I think, about how, like, this book has kind of two main protagonists with Kelsier and Vin.
Mm-hmm.
But I like how this book lays the groundwork, because I think the two real protagonists of the series are actually Vin and Stazed. And it's really like their story. And Kelsier is more of a inciting incident in a lot of ways, and how he kind of launches both Vin and Stazed's stories in this book and sets them on the path. And then they're also, the three of them together make a really interesting trinity as the playing with the archetype of the chosen one, which we know Brandon was really interested in. And so we have, the original story of the false chosen one, we find out Alendi, and then an even falser chosen one, Rashik, taking his place. And then with these three, you have Kelsier kind of making himself into a chosen one. He's a manufactured messiah. You have Vin, who, like, really feels like the chosen one and is a chosen one in some ways. Mm-hmm. And kind of always feeling the call of destiny and answering it. And then you have Stazed, who's kind of this more resistant background figure who goes through these highs and lows throughout the series and then becomes the ultimate hero of ages. I was really struck in this book how he's kind of setting that up with the three of them. Initially, when I read this, Stazed is such he's a prominent character, but he's still like Vin's sidekick, right?
Yeah.
Not a super, but I did like how he kind of wove in some of those notes of what he would become in the later books.
And I think going off that, a thought that occurred to me, Rashik is tired. He is tired of everything in this book. Would he actually have taken up the power again when the well filled in the next year? Because Preservation was like, yeah, Rashik's gonna keep doing this. I love the guy because he keeps things the same. But I kind of think he wouldn't have done it like when the well refilled because he's so tired of it.
I think he would have because I think he would have looked at it as this will revive me. I won't be so tired anymore once I've taken the power again. I'll be okay. Yeah, I think that's what has maybe been keeping him going is the idea that there's that light at the end of the tunnel of being able to take the power again and maybe fix things better.
Yeah, that's me. Is I imagine he would take it up as a chance to fix things. He just has to stick around long enough to, for it to come back, and then he can maybe fix some of the problems that he's created. Then Vin comes along and throws a wrench into that entire plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Rashik's interesting because he's kind of stuck in that situation of, I had the power for 5 minutes, unexpectedly. I had no time to make any plan about how I was going to use it because I didn't know what it was going to be. And then I just kind of did the best I could. And now he's had 1,000 years to think about everything he could have done better with that 5 minutes. I think the tiredness for me partially speaks to kind of the unnatural nature of how he's extending his life. Mm-hmm. I like how it contrasts with the other ageless entities we meet in the Cosmere, like the Kandra and the although actually now that I'm thinking about it, tiredness and agelessness do kind of go together because the first generation we have being very tired and the returned often don't live long because they start to feel a call to move to the beyond. And the heralds are tired too.
Raboniel, she just wants the war to end.
To win if she can, but if she loses, so be it, then at least it's done.
So yeah, that's really interesting. I'm now reversing my point. I think maybe Brandon is kind of pointing that all forms of immortality might be somewhat unnatural for the human body and are pushing.
And Hoyt seems to be doing okay, but Hoyt has also done some weird stuff.
Yeah.
He also has a massive amount of investiture. Well, theoretically, he can store his memories externally, which is probably Rashik is using his copper mines for that because we know that's an issue for people who live a long time.
Your brain only stores so much information.
Hoyt also has ongoing plans and things he is trying to do and a lot to keep track of across multiple worlds, whereas Rashik and some of the others are just trying to keep on going in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Which I think might help him.
Talking about the Lord Ruler's metal mine, people, we've got the Bands of Mourning, which everybody wants the Bands of Mourning because Mistborn powers. Could you imagine unlocking the Lord Ruler's copper mine and being able to see that for a little bit?
There's got to be some really salty memories in there. I mean, that guy was jaded.
Oh, yeah. But I wonder now if that would be something that Brandon would even play with is once the Bands of Mourning have truly been found, or
the Bands of Mourning aren't actually a thing. So it's
okay, fair, because that's actually Kelsier's.
Yeah,
it's they're an artificial thing. It's there are no stories about the Bands of Mourning in Era 1 because they're just metal mines. They flew off the edge of the building, never to be seen again.
They did pick them up. They found them and found out there wasn't that much atium in them.
Yeah,
I thought I had with the bands that he had that I didn't quite understand how this would how this would work. he's using these bands to stay young, and Vin taking them out makes him die. What if someone just cut off his arm? Has no one cut off his arm at all in the 1,000 years that he has been there? Like, he's been blown up once. How? Like, I guess, like, I know that gold can revive the body, and I think Wayne gets blown up as well. But if disconnection from the atium, from his atium mind is what makes him age and die, then what happens in the cases where he has been attacked to the point that they have been disconnected from him in the past?
Depends on when it happened.
Yeah, he's pretty young. I think he says it happens within like the first couple of centuries, and it was compounded in that, you know, he's been alive for 1,000 years, so he's got 1,000 years worth of catch up, versus a century's worth of catch up would happen over the course of a half hour,
much more slowly.
5 minutes.
Okay.
But also, it's like he has like metal mines on both arms. Like, you have to chop both of them off at the same time. And there's a whole thing that, like, it's not, gold healing isn't always intuitive. Like, it's not like it goes off of the largest piece of you.
Yeah.
So it's like, get your head chopped off. You're just going to grow a new head rather than like your head growing a new body. So
Still
it's like,
so weird to me because it's what your brain is, but I get it.
Yeah,
Cosmere
but,
doesn't
like,
work that way.
yeah, the Cosmere is like, there's the 3 realms. It's like, your head isn't the center of you. So it's like, as long as like so it does make sense. It's like, you have to like disconnect it from his flesh entirely.
I mean,
to
be fair to Jess, I think that he says that, like, when he's caught fire, he's like a skeleton.
Which is not a direct quote. It's a myth about him. So we don't actually know if he was, like, it's not him saying that. It's the rumors the crew has been able to uncover about the Lord Ruler. And so they describe these accounts of him burning down to a skeleton.
I think he says at the end, like, I've been blown, or I've been caught fire, or I've been blown up or something. So but again, as long as it's early enough into his life and he has access to gold.
Something I always use to help justify Vin, because it's Vin beating the Lord Ruler here is kind of a fluke, I think, as well. Fortune was strong for her, you might say. Something I've tried to remind myself of is I don't think the Lord Ruler was like in full combat mode with Vin, because he didn't think he needed to be. Whereas on some of these battles, if he's like leading an army and is staying in an inn and it gets burned down, like, he knows I'm surrounded by enemies and I'm ready for anything. And the thing about compounding is, like, it does take some setup, and how you set it up can be different. So maybe when he's like out on a campaign, he has like more hidden ATM and gold mines and has some swallowed ones and has taken some different steps. Whereas when he fights Vin, like, he's in his throne room, center of his power, surrounded by inquisitors. He hasn't had a real challenge in hundreds of years. And there's this like 1 year of experience Mistborn girl who he's slapping around like a doll. It kind of, that's how I justify it in my headcanon.
And then the idea that I brought up in the character episode, that he's just tired, and maybe there's a part of him that really didn't want to fight that hard.
I don't know, like, based off of like what I remember from like when we see him in Secret History after his death, like, he goes into the Beyond willingly, but like I didn't really get a sense of him being like tired. Oh, finally, it's just like fine, like, I'm just gonna, like, I'm dead now, I'm buggering off.
Yeah, he didn't have any more real investment in sticking around, in telling them anything important. He's just like, meh, screw you guys, I'm going on. You know, he just didn't care. And, you know, even if he wasn't like actively death wishing, he just, he didn't seem to have enough of an emotional investment in sticking around to really fight that hard.
But like I see that like as two very different things. It's like he's not invested in fighting because like why would he expect like this random Mistborn to draw upon the mist? Like that, like I totally don't blame him for not giving this fight his all. It's like by
Why
all
should he
rights,
bother?
he should have won.
And some people argue that why did he scramble after the things? Why didn't he use iron to just pull them to him? And I mean, he was caught off guard and he panicked. And he hasn't had to do anything like using iron or steel in combat for a very long time. And he's out of practice and
I think also like it happens very fast. Like because I think it says he reached for them, which for all we know, it might have been a reach, which would have been followed by an iron pull, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Vin quickly pushes them away. But yeah, no, the Lord Ruler is really interesting for a lot of reasons to look at in hindsight. So I'm glad we're talking about it in this episode because he's such a unique character, even in like the scope of the Cosmere. Like there's very few other people who have like kind of the combination of power and knowledge that he did.
Also, he has kids out there that are apparently not important.
Eric's not here to complain.
I loved Trellism.
Trelligism.
Yeah, Trelligism.
Trelligism.
Yes.
But always fun.
Yeah.
That little shadow. And we got a Tensoon name drop in one of Ellen's point of view scenes, and we're like, oh, I know him.
Yeah.
It's so
and it's
subtle as well. Like, I'm sure people did remember it and pick up on it, but I don't know how.
Rereads.
Yeah.
I don't think there was anybody thinking back. I don't think anybody caught it the first time around. I think it was the rereads that is when people started picking up on it.
But
Like,
also, like, in that scene, it's like he's referred to as the venture Kandra, which is like, we don't know what Kandra means at that point in time. And like, there's a couple other viewpoints, like, where it's like, I think it's Hammond's viewpoint, where he sees Renault, like, or Sewer, get the axe in the back and like make eye contact, and like Renault like falls down the ground, and like Hammond says like, I don't think that's fatal for a Kandra, like he's just playing along. It's like we get like the use of the word Kandra like a couple of times before we learn what a Kandra actually is, which I think is really neat.
Yeah. And I think when you're reading that scene for the first time, you're seeing that element of it, that it's one of these building blocks of the world that you need to understand a twist that happens later. So it's like, oh, Kandra are servants of the nobility. We're learning that in this scene. So you're not thinking this is going to be a significant character later. You're thinking, okay, this gave me the piece of knowledge I needed to know to understand help understand Kelsier's plan later.
It's the foreshadowing. The foreshadowing is great.
Yes.
Brandon is amazing at foreshadowing.
Oh, and speaking of foreshadowing, I feel like we can't talk about Final Empire without talking about how on the first frickin' page it says, I will bear the future of the world on my arms.
Another important thing to note is like Brandon wrote the entire trilogy straight through, then went back to revise. So it's like he could do like this is some of the best foreshadowing like he's done like ever, because like he's not just like setting up the T-balls for a book 3 books down the road that hasn't been written yet. Like he has the 3 books and he can really play with the foreshadowing in a beautiful way.
Talking about foreshadowing, I loved I will be connected to the kings, but I'm not actually a king myself. And there's an entire
the bloodless bond to the world's kings.
Yeah, or like
the Discord.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of that prophecy of I'm related to the kings through marriage, and you read it after the fact and you're like, no. You're get out of the way. You have no idea what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I actually forgot that the Discord reference was in this book. I thought it was in Hero of Ages, and I got to it and I was like, oh, wow, we're doing this now. Okay.
Yeah, like the Discord harmony. Like,
yeah.
Shut up. Yeah, I love how he plays with prophecy in these books, because at the end, you're still wondering, preservation, like, do the prophecies mean anything? Because, like, preservation, like, we know preservation set them up and apparently has good future sight, but, like...
And probably also accurately predicted how Ruin was going to mess with them.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's the thing. So it's like, and are you like, so in a way, was Alendi really a hero of ages? Was Rashik in some ways a hero of ages? Was Vin in some ways, like, we have this lineage of kind of heroes, and, to what extent are they all, because even Kelsier, I think some of the prophecies can apply to Kelsier too. And so it's this, we have these central heroic figures that all had a part to play to get Sazed to the point where he needed to be to save the world and become the final hero.
Interesting that I want to say in the annotations, one of the working titles for Hero of Ages was the final hero. But Brennan couldn't come up with the final name for Well of Ascension, so he just ditched it. I do like that there was a succession of heroes of the ages, and then there was the final one.
And the final, the hero of maybe these were heroes of their age, and then that is the hero of ages because he's the hero that lasts through the ages, right? Is how he...
Speaking of foreshadowing, something that I noticed right at the beginning, I'm pretty sure this is in the prologue, is the start of the references to the cave systems and their importance. And not only is that, like, of course, big for this book, but big for the entire series. And I wasn't expecting it. And of course, Kelsey is talking to Menace, and it's like, oh yeah, these cave systems that people just go and live in and do stuff in. It's like, it's right there at the beginning.
I think it's that he's talking, Menace is, what are we going to do? And Menace is like, well, there's caves that the people are in. I think that's how they come up. But
okay, either way, it's right at the beginning. It was great.
He knows about the caves, and then that sets it up for when the Ska Resistance goes there. Menace is one of the people who's already just been chilling there.
I was thinking, could we talk about the Scadrian world hoppers, the minor ones like Felt and, I'm going to butcher this name because I don't say it the French way, Demox.
Demo.
Oh, Demo.
Yeah, Demo.
That guy, him.
I used to say it Demo X, if that makes you feel better, and now everyone's okay to laugh at me.
I think technically the French pronunciation is Demu.
Yeah.
But it's Demo. I say Demo.
I'm using the graphic audio pronunciation.
Well, because when this book came out, there was no conception of world hoppers until we got the Hoyd mention. So then we know at least Hoyd.
Yeah.
Because we had Elantris in Final Empire. So we're like, okay, there's...
Hoyd was really into that informant character that he was playing here too. He's just Hoyd, like, really, Hoyd? You're really overselling this. I mean, the method acting here is a bit over the top.
But it's the beginning of like their hatred for each other.
Yes.
They loathe each other. Felt is such an interesting character because it's like, we didn't think he was the same person when he showed up in Words of Radiance. Like, why would we think this random spy master from House Venture would end up being a world hopper? But it makes sense. Like, he tied to House Ventures, like they ran the pits. The pits are perpendicularity. Like, there was a thriving mercantile enterprise there. It's like, how much did House Venture know about that? Like, it's like,
or like, how much was these societies keeping tabs on Venture because of their oversight? So even if Venture didn't know, maybe Felt was positioned to work for them.
The question becomes, does Felt originate from Scadrial, or is he one of our very first world hoppers? Because Demo originated from Scadrial. We know that.
He's not a world hopper when we meet him. Yeah.
I think it's confirmed that Felt's from Scadrial.
He might be a world hopper, though, already when we see him in the books.
Yes, definitely.
Demu we know is not a world hopper yet.
Yeah. He joins the 17th Shard later on.
I had a thought. This was like last night. I had this thought. I was thinking about this. We also know another Scadrian world hopper that we have a hard time tracking is the there's a Kandra world hopper somewhere.
Where's
And there's a
Waldo?
word of Brandon to shoot this down. But I was like, what if Felt is the world hopping Kandra?
I mean-
and wouldn't that be like a trolly move on Brandon's part to be like, oh, there's a world hopper you already know about, but you don't know he's a Kandra. So I'm going to say there's a world hopping Kandra.
So then is Felt the Felt that we see here, or is it a Kandra pretending to be Felt later on who's using his bones? We don't know!
Yep.
Anyway, just random.
Is the Felt we see here already a Kandra?
That's what I was asking.
Yeah.
Which somebody asked Ten soon.
Maybe if he was Kandra, because he stands out a bit on Roshar. Like he's noted for having distinctive features, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe if he was a Kandra, he would be better at blending in and making some
Probably
adjustments.
That's fair.
Or, the Kandra is being extra clever and is blending in by not blending in.
It would make sense as well with the talks about cultivation not liking him, and maybe it's more than he's a world hopper, but he's a Kandra and cultivation does not like Kandra.
Well, I don't think the implication was that like cultivation doesn't like him. It's like the Night Watcher doesn't show up to non-natives.
Non-Rosharans. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's like,
I'm more boring
and
than you.
Dalinar has remarked is like, well, I'm not from around here either. And like, Felt's like, no, I'm less
I'm
than
really
what you
different.
are.
You're more local than I am, trust me.
Yeah. You need a connection, potentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, it is interesting too seeing Brandon starting to play with some of these like bigger concepts like connection and fortune and all this that we don't have much at all on, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, because he said Atium was like built specifically to foreshadow fortune as a concept in the Cosmere.
There's also the influences, and for some reason my mind thinks that this plays into what was just said, but I don't know. There's the influences with Gemmel and the 11th metal and the push through Ruin to set this path in motion, which presumably has come from Ruin's future sight.
The other fun thing, speaking of Ruin, that I love doing every time I reread these books since the first time I read them, is picking out when it's Ruin whispering to Vin and when she's actually remembering Reen, because it actually is set up differently. Like she'll be like, oh yeah, I remember when Reen would say, and then there's other times when it's like, don't trust them, said Reen. And so it's like, oh, like that is like Reen's voice is actually speaking to her right now. And later we find out that was Ruin. But I think the exception is, I want to say there's a wob somewhere, because there's the one at the end of this book where Reen says, go to him. And I think Brandon has said that time it was not Ruin somehow. Or maybe it was Ruin and he wanted her to go to Elend because he could see, maybe she was more likely to get to the well if she was with Elend. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
It could have just been her mind saying something in Reen's voice and it being the follow-on from the fact that he didn't actually betray her. So she's thinking in his voice, but down a different path.
So, but the way it's written follows the pattern of the other.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if Brandon said that it's not, then that's what comes to mind for me.
Yeah, and I think I'd have to go back through the text version of the book to pick those out because it doesn't come across in the graphic audio version anyway, because all of those naked dialogue tags get stripped out because you don't need dialogue tags when you can tell who's speaking just from the voice.
Yeah.
Except when you can't tell because
I don't know. I don't have any trouble telling them apart, but
I struggle. Like when they're like all back to back, is like sometimes I could tell, but sometimes I'm like, it's like.
I think I had trouble at first, but once I learned them, it got easier. I also have really tonally sensitive ears, if that makes sense. So I pick out vocal timbres like that. You don't get to be a first chair oboist in university band and orchestra without having a good ear.
We get the setup of like the shard pools in this book with in the bumps. Fidic investigates a strange metal pool, and then a mist spirit injures him. We get a lot of setup for the mist spirit here.
Vin feels pulses from the well at one point.
Yeah,
that's set up here.
When she's trying to
Credit
she's
Shaw.
really focusing in on her allomancy.
Yeah, she feels the other. Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, that's right. That happens when she's trying to pierce Kelsier's copper cloud. For a moment, she hears the well.
She hears something else. Yeah. And I think Brandon, even at that part, if I'm remembering correctly, conveniently positioned them in relation to Credit Shaw, so she would feel it to the north. And I wasn't sure if that was a mistake, because I know at one point the well wasn't located at Credit Shaw, or if it was a misdirection to keep that idea that if people caught on to that the spoiler that the well was moved wouldn't be spoiled by that, but it would still foreshadow her connection to the wall.
And it's still faint at this point because it hasn't filled yet.
Okay, well, thank you for watching, everyone. You can find us at 17shard.com for all your news, discussion, theories, and fun that you could ever have. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, leave us a review on iTunes, subscribe on YouTube, and support us on Patreon. See you all next time. Bye.
Bye.